The distant sun cast a harsh orange glow over the jagged, unforgiving terrain of Droska 7, an alien moon known for its volatile atmosphere and unstable crust. It was here, amidst the chaos of churning winds and treacherous ground, that the Galactic Union Academy chose to conduct its most grueling survival drill, a simulated rescue mission designed to break even the strongest cadets. Jace Klein tightened the straps of his environment suit and surveyed the situation. His squad, a mix of humans and aliens, had scattered after a simulated quake triggered the collapse of an underground training bunker. Somewhere beneath tons of jagged rock and loose soil were 3 squadmates, their biosigns faint but active. "Earth boy, what's the plan?" snarked Grell, a tall, insectitharvian known for his skepticism of human cadets. "Your Deathworld instincts got a solution for this mess?" Jace ignored the jab, focusing instead on the cracked handheld scanner in his gloved hand. It displayed a scrambled map of the subterranean maze below. He tapped the screen and adjusted the settings, noting weak structural points that could either help or doom the operation. "First, we locate them. Second, we get them out alive," Jace said firmly. "No unnecessary risks." The squad exchanged skeptical glances. Humans were a recent addition to the Galactic Union, and Deathworlders, inhabitants of harsh, life-threatening planets, were both admired and feared. Most saw Jace as a wildcard, his survival instincts an unpredictable asset. Jace knelt beside a fissure and tested the ground with a vibroprobe. The moon's crust was laced with volatile gas pockets that could ignite with the smallest spark. Standard equipment, like plasma cutters, was useless here. His mind raced, calculating possibilities. "That'll take hours," muttered Rin, a feline Valari with sharp ears and sharper claws. "They don't have hours." "Then we'll have to make ours," Jace replied, his tone sharp. "Rin, Grell, start clearing debris at the surface. Use hand tools only. I'll figure out a way to reinforce the tunnels." As the others moved reluctantly to follow his orders, Jace pulled out his multipurpose drill, a standard-issue tool meant for basic excavation. Its power core gleamed in the dusty light, an energy source stable enough to run for hours but too weak for large-scale operations. A spark of inspiration struck him. Jace rummaged through his pack, pulling out spare components, stabilizers, cables, and a small field generator. If he could amplify the drill's frequency to resonate with the gas pockets, he might be able to collapse the unstable areas without triggering an explosion. "Of course, you're improvising," muttered a voice behind him. It was Lyra, a Zalari medic with crystalline skin that refracted light into rainbows. "Is this a human thing, or just a you thing?" Jace grinned. "It's an if it works, I'm a genius thing." Lyra's laugh was brief but genuine. "Let's hope you're still a genius when this is over." As the drill whirred to life, Jace's hands moved with practiced precision. The improvised device began emitting low-frequency vibrations, destabilizing the loose soil but leaving the main structure intact. It was slow going, but the biosigns on his scanner grew clearer with each passing minute. Beneath the surface, the trapped cadets were running out of oxygen. Every second counted. "Jace!" Rin shouted, her voice sharp. "The gas levels are spiking! We're sitting on a bomb!" Jace's heart pounded, but he kept his focus. "Then let's make sure it doesn't go off. Keep clearing the debris and trust me." For the first time, the squad worked as a cohesive unit, their movements synchronized as they dug, stabilized, and reinforced. Jace's unorthodox methods were unconventional, even risky, but his determination was infectious. Finally, a shout rang out. "We've got them!" Rin and Grell pulled the first cadet to safety, followed quickly by the second. The third, a bruised but breathing Saurian, gave a weak thumbs up as he was lifted into the light. Jace collapsed against a rock, sweat dripping down his brow despite the suit's cooling systems. The squad stared at him, a mix of relief and disbelief in their eyes. "Deathworld instincts," Jace said, smirking. "They work every time." But as he glanced back at the fissure, his scanner beeped urgently. The ground beneath them was far from stable, and the real challenge was only beginning. The fissure groaned ominously, and a tremor rippled through the ground, causing the cadets to stumble. Jace's scanner flashed red with urgency, blaring an alarm that signified one thing: the entire section of the underground tunnel was about to collapse. "We're not done!" Jace barked, pushing himself to his feet. "Everyone move back now!" The squad scrambled to retreat to safer ground, but the uneven terrain and rising gas levels turned every step into a gamble. Rin cursed under her breath, her feline grace barely saving her from tumbling into a crevasse that opened suddenly beneath her feet. Jace grabbed her arm and pulled her back. "Stick together!" he ordered. The scanner in his hand flickered, showing erratic data. The underground gas pockets were destabilizing faster than anticipated, and the faint tremors beneath their boots threatened to turn catastrophic. It wasn't just the fissure anymore, the entire rescue zone was at risk of imploding. "We need to seal the fissure," Lyra said, her crystalline features glowing faintly as she scanned the area with her medical visor. "If we don't, the chain reaction will spread to the surface." "Seal it how?" Grell snapped, his antennae twitching anxiously. "You want to ask the moon to behave?" Jace ignored the sarcasm, his mind racing. His makeshift device had worked to stabilize the initial collapse, but now they needed something more drastic to prevent a total disaster. He glanced at the drill, then at the field generator still humming with energy. "We'll use a controlled detonation," Jace said, his voice steady despite the chaos. "A detonation?" Grell's mandibles clicked in disbelief. "Are you insane? This whole place could blow. It's either that, or we wait for the gas to ignite on its own and take all of us with it." Jace shot back. "I'm not leaving anyone behind." Lyra nodded, her calm demeanor cutting through the rising panic. "He's right. If we can direct the blast to collapse the fissure inward, it might stabilize the area long enough for us to get out." Jace began assembling the components for the detonation, his hands moving with practiced precision. The field generator would act as the core, its energy directed through the drill to create a focused shockwave. He worked quickly, the rising tremors a constant reminder of their dwindling time. "Rin, Grell, I need you to clear a path to the transport," Jace said without looking up. "Lyra, help me rig this thing. We'll set it remotely and get out of here before it blows." The squad moved into action, their earlier skepticism replaced by urgency. Even Grell, whose distrust of humans had been palpable, now followed Jace's orders without hesitation. As they worked, the fissure widened, spewing clouds of toxic gas into the air. Jace's environment suit beeped warnings about rising levels of methane and sulfur dioxide. His breathing quickened, but he forced himself to focus. "Almost there," Lyra said, handing him a stabilizer clamp. "If this doesn't work, you'll make the next textbook chapter on Deathworld recklessness." Jace grinned despite the tension. "Let's make sure it's a success story." The device hummed to life, its components glowing faintly as Jace activated the timer. He set it for 3 minutes, barely enough time to escape the blast radius, but long enough to give them a fighting chance. "Move now!" he shouted, waving the squad toward the transport. They sprinted across the unstable terrain, the fissures rumbling growing louder with each step. The transport, a rugged hovercraft designed for harsh environments, waited at the edge of the collapse zone. Rin and Grell were already inside, securing the rescued cadets. Jace and Lyra reached the transport just as the fissure erupted in a violent roar. A massive plume of gas shot into the sky, igniting in a brief but brilliant flash. The ground beneath them buckled, and for a heart-stopping moment, it seemed the entire area would cave in. Then silence. The fissure sealed itself in a cloud of dust and debris, the controlled detonation having worked exactly as Jace had intended. The ground stabilized, and the scanner in his hand stopped its frantic beeping. Jace slumped into a seat inside the transport, his hands trembling from the adrenaline. The squad stared at him, a mixture of relief and awe on their faces. "You're insane," Grell muttered, his tone lacking its usual bite. "Maybe," Jace said, catching his breath. "But we're alive." The transport lifted off, its thrusters carrying them away from the danger zone. For the first time since the mission began, Jace allowed himself a moment of relief. But his scanner chimed again, this time with a different alert. There was movement beneath the surface, not just geological, but biological. Something was stirring deep within the moon's crust. Jace sat up, his exhaustion replaced by a grim determination. "This isn't over," he said quietly. And as the squad exchanged uneasy glances, the reality of their situation began to sink in. The rescue was only the beginning. The transport hovered at a safe distance, its engines thrumming steadily as Jace examined the scanner's readout. The biological signals beneath the surface weren't just faint blips. They were concentrated and moving. "What are we looking at?" Rin asked, leaning over his shoulder. "Something big," Jace replied, his voice tense. The scanner displayed a three-dimensional map of the moon's crust, showing a web of tunnels converging toward their location. Whatever was down there was heading straight for the now-sealed fissure. "Big enough to notice us?" Grell asked nervously, his antennae twitching. "Not just notice," Lyra said, her visor glowing faintly as she synced with the scanner. "It's reacting to the detonation. We woke it up." Jace's mind raced. The mission had already tested the squad to their limits, but if there was something alive, and hostile, beneath the surface, their ordeal was far from over. "We can't leave those cadets behind," he said firmly. "If we take off and this thing breaches, they're as good as dead." "Then what's the plan?" Lyra asked. Jace looked at the fissure on the map. "We go back down." The silence was deafening. Even Rin, usually quick to support him, hesitated. "You're serious?" Grell finally said, incredulous. "You want to dive back into that death trap?" "Not want," Jace said, standing. "Need. Whatever's down there could be a threat to the colony, not just us. We have to contain it." Lyra nodded reluctantly. "I'll prep the drones. If we're doing this, we'll need every advantage." The transport landed, and the squad geared up once more. Jace retrieved the now-modified drill, which he had rigged with additional energy stabilizers. It would serve as both a tool and a weapon if necessary. Descending into the fissure felt different this time. The air was heavier, the tremors more deliberate. The tunnel walls glistened with an unearthly sheen, as though the moon itself was alive and watching. "What is this?" Rin whispered, running her clawed hand over the shimmering surface. "Not natural," Lyra said, her visor scanning the area. "It's some kind of organic compound, part mineral, part tissue." "That's comforting," Grell muttered, gripping his plasma rifle tightly. As they ventured deeper, the biological signals grew stronger. The tunnels opened into a vast cavern, its walls pulsating faintly with a dim, bioluminescent glow. In the center of the chamber lay a massive structure, half buried in the ground. It was unlike anything they'd ever seen, a hybrid of technology and organic matter, humming with a low, resonant vibration. "That's not a rock," Rin said, stating the obvious. "It's a hive," Jace said grimly. Before anyone could respond, the ground beneath them shifted. The hive began to pulse more intensely, and the vibrations became a deafening hum. From the shadows, massive forms began to emerge, creatures with chitinous exoskeletons and glowing, multifaceted eyes. "Contact!" Grell shouted, raising his rifle. The first creature lunged, its claws striking the ground where Jace had stood moments before. He rolled aside, firing his weapon at its exposed underbelly. The shot connected, and the creature screeched, its cry echoing through the chamber. "They're guarding it!" Lyra shouted, ducking as another creature charged. "No," Jace said, his voice tight. "They're protecting it. This isn't just a hive, it's a nursery." The realization hit hard. The creatures weren't attacking out of malice but instinct. They were defending their offspring. "We need to get out of here," Rin said, slashing at a creature with her blade. "No," Jace said again, his mind racing. "If we leave this thing intact, it's only a matter of time before it expands, and they won't stop at defending their hive." He turned to Lyra. "Can you overload the field generator?" Lyra hesitated, her eyes widening. "Jace, that could collapse the entire chamber. We wouldn't make it out." "It's the only way," he said. "We collapse the nursery, take out the hive, and stop this before it spreads." The squad exchanged uncertain glances, but the determination in Jace's eyes left no room for argument. Fine, Lyra said, pulling the generator from her pack. But we'll need time to set it up, and a distraction to keep them off us. Jace nodded. I'll buy you that time. Before anyone could protest, he sprinted toward the center of the chamber, the modified drill in hand. The creatures turned their attention to him immediately, their screeches rising in unison. Jace! Rin shouted, but he was already in the thick of it. He activated the drill, its energy field sparking to life. The creatures recoiled, their movements erratic as they tried to avoid the weapon's reach. Jace moved with calculated precision, drawing the swarm away from Lyra and the others. Come on! He shouted, his voice echoing. You wanted a fight, didn't you? Meanwhile, Lyra worked quickly, her hands a blur as she calibrated the generator. Almost there, she called. Jace fought back another creature, his movements slowing as exhaustion set in. The swarm pressed closer, their sheer numbers overwhelming. Done! Lyra shouted. Jace, fall back! But he was trapped, surrounded on all sides. He looked back at the squad, a faint smile on his face. Get out of here, he said. Jace, no! Rin cried. Before they could stop him, Jace slammed the drill into the ground, its energy field erupting in a blinding flash. The shockwave rippled through the chamber, triggering the generator's overload. The last thing the squad saw was the hive collapsing in on itself, the creature's screeches fading into silence. The squad barely made it out of the fissure. The ground quaked violently as the hive collapsed beneath them, sending clouds of dust and debris into the air. They scrambled onto the waiting transport, Lyra slamming the hatch shut just as the fissure swallowed the cavern below. The deafening roar of the collapsing moon's surface gave way to silence. Inside the cabin, the squad sat motionless, their faces streaked with grime and disbelief. He didn't make it, Rin whispered, her voice trembling. Jace didn't. Lyra slammed her fist against the console. Don't say that. Not yet. He has to have found a way out. But the tracker in Jace's suit displayed no signal. The reality of his sacrifice settled over them like a weight they couldn't bear to lift. Rin turned to the pilot. Take us back to the colony. Now. The transport rose into the air, the fissure shrinking beneath them as the vehicle ascended. Outside, the moon's surface bore the scars of their mission, jagged cracks and darkened craters where the hive had once pulsed with life. Back at the colony, the squad disembarked in silence. A crowd had gathered, their anxious faces lit by the flickering lights of the docking bay. Commander Soren stood at the forefront, his expression a mixture of relief and concern. Report, he demanded. Rin stepped forward, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. The hive has been neutralized. The threat is contained. And Cadet Jace? Soren asked, though the answer was evident in the squad's somber expressions. He stayed behind to ensure the mission's success, Lyra said quietly. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Among the colonists were the cadets Jace had saved earlier, their faces pale with shock. He saved us, one of them said, stepping forward. He didn't even hesitate. He just did what had to be done. Soren's gaze softened. He nodded slowly, turning to the crowd. Today, we lost one of our own. But his sacrifice ensured the safety of this colony, and all of us. Cadet Jace's name will not be forgotten. The following days were marked by a solemn yet determined energy. The colony worked tirelessly to reinforce its defenses, ensuring nothing like the hive could ever threaten them again. But amidst the rebuilding, Jace's absence was deeply felt. In the command center, Lyra sat alone, reviewing the data they had collected from the mission. Her fingers hovered over the controls as she replayed Jace's final moments on the screen. She had watched it a dozen times, hoping for some missed detail that would prove he had survived. But the footage only confirmed what they already knew: Jace had given everything to protect them. A knock at the door broke her reverie. Rin entered, holding a small data drive. What's that? Lyra asked, her voice hoarse. Something I found in his locker, Rin said, handing it over. It's addressed to all of us. Lyra inserted the drive into the console. A holographic image of Jace appeared, his trademark grin lighting up the room. Hey team, he began, his voice warm and steady. If you're seeing this, I guess things didn't go exactly as planned. But that's okay. I've always believed that we're more than just individuals. We're a team, and a team survives because of trust, sacrifice, and the willingness to do what's right, even when it's hard. The squad gathered around the console, the weight of his words sinking in. I know I probably drove you all crazy with my plans and ideas, Jace continued, a hint of humor in his tone. But every choice I made was because I believed in you, in all of us. Humanity didn't survive this long by playing it safe. We take risks. We adapt. And we always look out for each other. He paused, his expression softening. Don't let this mission be the end of what we started. Use what we've learned. Make sure no one else has to face what we did. And, maybe name something cool after me? Just saying. The hologram faded, leaving the room in silence. We should do it, Brel said quietly. Do what? Lyra asked. Name something after him, Brel replied. Something big. Something that lasts. The idea spread quickly through the colony. Within days, a towering structure rose at the site of the fissure, a beacon visible for miles across the moon's barren surface. Engraved on its base were the words, Cadet Jace Andara, Defender of Humanity, Champion of Hope. The beacon served not only as a memorial but as a warning to any who would underestimate the resilience of humanity. It pulsed with a soft, golden light, a reminder of the courage it took to stand against the unknown. As the years passed, Jace's story became legend. Children grew up hearing tales of the cadet from a death world who transformed a simple drill into a tool of salvation. And while the colony thrived, Jace's legacy endured, not just in the monument that bore his name, but in the hearts of everyone who called the moon their home. Rin stood at the base of the beacon one quiet evening, her eyes on the stars. You'd hate all this attention, she said softly, a smile tugging at her lips. But you earned it, Jace. Every bit of it. The beacon's light reflected in her eyes as she turned to rejoin her squad, the team that had become her family. Together they walked into the future, carrying Jace's memory with them, proof that even in the darkest of places, the light of humanity could shine through.